So there's my bio. Hopefully everyone has seen that. Today we're going to be talking about origins of Louisville's legendary originals, locals who made a name nationally and internationally from Louisville. The first we're going to talk about is Pappy Van Winkle. How many people like bourbon here? And if you do, you've heard of Pappy Van Winkle. We have a lot of legendary bourbons here in Kentucky, of course. Here are just a few of those. But perhaps nationally and internationally, probably the most famous is Pappy Van Winkle. And the reason for that is how much it cost. I am not a bourbon aficionado, so I've never bought a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. But as you can see, it can be very pricey. And the reason for that is it's usually aged 3 times longer than most bourbons. Most bourbons are about 7 years as they age, whereas Pappy Van Winkle is 21 years or more. So that's one reason. Another is they use a different sort of formula for their bourbon. It's become a very celebrity-oriented bourbon, and it's won numerous awards. So that's one reason why Pappy costs so much. So here's the background of who Pappy Van Winkle is. There's his full name, Julian Proctor Pappy Van Winkle, born in 1874, was involved in the Stitzel Weller distillery out in Shively. There he is. He passed away in 1965. He was the oldest active distiller in the state at the time, and probably still is. I'm not sure who would still be distilling at the age of 89. And as noted, when he passed away, no bourbon was named after him. There on the left is his grave site in Cave Hill Cemetery. It's not very far from the entrance off the Grinstead Drive entrance there. If you go in, it's just off to the right is where he is buried. Kentucky Derby coming up here fairly shortly. So here are some images of Churchill Downs. The upper left-hand corner is the original grandstand, which was built on the east side of the track. Then in 1895, they moved it on the west side of the track. Why did they move it? Does anyone know?
Sun.
The sun, exactly. The spectators, as it was setting in the afternoon, had a glare to it, and they couldn't tell who won the race. And so that's the reason why they moved it to the west side, so the sun was no longer a factor. And the first Derby, as noted, was May 17th, 1875. It was 1.5 miles length. So here's how the Derby began. We have Thomas Jefferson here, who sent his good friend George Rogers Clark to this part of Virginia. We were all Virginians back in those days. When did Kentucky become a state? 1792. It's amazing how many Louisvillians aren't aware of that. But anyways, we were all Virginians, and so Thomas Jefferson, who was governor of Virginia at the time, sent his good friend George Rogers Clark here to protect the Falls of the Ohio during the Revolutionary War. They were both born in the same county of Virginia. Then, of course, Thomas Jefferson sent William Clark, the brother of George, on the expedition to the Northwest. William Clark and Meriwether Lewis and Clark expedition. So now we're going to have a quiz on this afterwards, so y'all can pay attention to this. So there's Thomas Jefferson, who knew George Rogers Clark, who knew William Clark, who knew Meriwether Lewis. When William Clark had a son, he named him Meriwether Lewis Clark in honor of his expedition partner. And when Meriwether Lewis Clark had a son, with Abigail Prather Churchill was his wife, they named him Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. Everyone follow that genealogy there of how we got to Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr.? Well, Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. was an advocate of horse racing. He was a racing steward and all. And as you can see, he married a wealthy heiress, had money. Again, he was a nephew of the Churchill family because his mother was a Churchill. And so his uncle was John Churchill, John and Henry Churchill. And so he had the property there to build the racetrack. So now then, why do we not remember Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. to this day? Does anyone know how his namesake died, Meriwether Lewis? Anyone know how he passed away? Well, Meriwether Lewis it's kind of controversial how he died, but he died on the Natchez Trace just outside Nashville, Tennessee, by a gunshot wound to the head. But now, whether or not he committed suicide, although someone said that he had 2 bullets in his head, now I'm not sure how he would have done that if he had committed suicide, but I'll let that up to other folks to figure that out. But Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. also committed suicide in Memphis, Tennessee. So ironically, they had the same sort of death situation there. But that may be one reason why we don't remember Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. He was also not a very good business person. He pretty much ran the racetrack into bankruptcy, in which case another group of investors had to come in and take it over in the 1890s. It was originally called the Louisville Jockey Club and wasn't formally renamed Churchill Downs until the 1930s. I think it should be called Clark Downs for obvious reasons. It was Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. that started it. And today it brings hundreds of thousands of folks here, millions of dollars, a lot of revenue here. This is the Churchill family plot in the upper left-hand corner there. That's where a lot of Churchills are buried. And Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. is buried right over here just to the left of the main monument. This is in section A, and to get to that you have to come in through the main entrance, and it's off to the right. Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Wow.
So, Colonel Sanders, yes, he had a very varied career. I estimate he had, over at least 21 different jobs in his lifetime. He didn't finish grade school, dropping out at the 7th grade. Moved at least 23 times. You name it, he did it in his life period here. He was not from Kentucky. He was from Henryville, Indiana, just north of here. So he was a Hoosier, not a Kentuckian. And he was not a military colonel. He was an honorary Kentucky colonel. He sold KFC at the age of 73 for $2 million, which is $20 million today. It's all over the world, as you can tell. So if you're not yet 73, you can still make your millions of dollars as such. But anyway. Of course, he owned the restaurant, the motel, gas station down in Corbin, Kentucky. There it is. Hopefully some of you going south on 75 have taken the detour to see his original location there, which is still in operation. I think they still have a KFC at that location. This is the Colonel's gravesite in Cahill Cemetery. I always enjoy seeing a photograph of visiting your own gravesite. By the way, I always recommend people to get their headstones up before you go, because you never know what your descendants are going to do with the money. There's a number of people buried in Cahill that do not have headstones because the descendants took the money and did other things with it. His headstone is mirrored on the headquarters there off the Waterston Expressway. Happy birthday to you. So it was created by the Hill sisters, Mildred Hill, and then Patty Hill, and they lived outside Anchorage. Patty was the kindergarten teacher, or as I've been reprimanded many times, she was an early childhood educator. Mildred was the musician of the family, and together they wrote hundreds of early childhood educator songs. One of them was Good Morning to You, which they adapted at a friend's birthday party there near the Little Loom House near Iroquois Park. And they were both very well accomplished, not just for that song, but they were recognized. Patty came up with numerous childhood educator type procedures that are still practiced today of what she did. Mildred, musician, I think she's even in the Musician Hall of Fame. She wrote numerous songs and was very well noted for what she did. So just beyond that song, they're very well famous as well. Anyone here have a birthday? No birthday, so we can't sing the song, I don't guess. By the way, prior to 2015, if you went to a restaurant and they didn't sing the happy birthday song, they were singing some version of it. The reason why is it was copyrighted prior to then. But after 2015, the copyright is gone, so the restaurants can actually sing the song without having to pay for the copyright. Now then, this is their grave site in Cave Hill Cemetery. It's kind of difficult to find. It's not easy to point out where they're buried at Cave Hill. You almost have to ask the guards as you go in to find out where they're at. But one interesting thing about their grave site is you look at their headstones here, Patty Smith Hill, 1868, 1946. Even if you were there on the date of their birthday, you would not know it because their birth date is not listed on their headstone. No birthday. Always help us out as historians, put your full information on your headstone so we don't have to go look up the obituaries. There's one headstone in Cave Hill that if you go on the back side of it, tells everything that they did in their life, where they went on vacation, what they liked to eat, all that. And I know we kind of chuckle at that, but your great-great-great-great-grandkids, when they do the genealogy search on you, are going to love that sort of information. I know as a historian, the more information I can find off a headstone, the better off I am. Also put a little symbol on there as to what you did in life. I'm putting little architectural symbols on mine. So we kind of give a little help to us historians when we do our research. Louisville Slugger, Hillary McBradsby. So, Lewis Rogers, Pete Browning, and John Bud Hillary were the two key people in the Louisville Slugger story. And if you go on the website of LouisvilleSlugger.com, SluggerMuseum.com, they have a description here of how the bat came to be. It says that Pete Browning broke a bat one day, and Bud Hillary, was up in the stands that day, came down to Pete after the game and says, I can make you a bat that won't break. And Louisville Slugger has been hitting home runs ever since. That's the official story on their website. Is that the true story? Let's check it out. So even on Pete Browning's gravesite here in Cave Hill Cemetery, it has the same folklore about how the bat came to be, talk about him breaking a bat in a game, and Hillary creating the bat. So me as a historian, I always look into obituaries, as I just mentioned, and I looked up the obituary of the founder of Hillary McBradsby, John Friedrich Hillary. He was the father of Bud Hillary. Came to America in 1842 as a 9-year-old. Started the woodworking business. I think when he was 22 when he started his woodworking shop and all that. And then the Louisville Slugger started in 1884. But in his obituary, it gives the story of Louisville Slugger. It says, Pete came to Hillary one day when Hillary was a wood turner and asked him to make him some bats, which he did. According to the obituary, Pete came to the factory and ordered the bats. He didn't break a bat, he ordered the bats. It's interesting, I thought. That's different than what's on their website. Then I looked up Frank Bradsby. He was the co-owner of Hillary Bradsby. He was from Illinois, and his great-nephew wrote a book about his famous uncle. And in the book, it says that Browning was walking down the street one day, saw the woodworking shop, went in and ordered the bat. So we have two corroborations there that the bat was ordered and wasn't a broken bat. So you say, well, Steve, what does Bud Hillary's obituary say? Does he mention about the breaking of the bat or buying the bat or ordering the bat? What's up with that situation? So here's Bud's obituary in 1947. Doesn't mention anything about how the bat was started. So I'll leave it to your discretion which tale is correct. Browning broke the bat or Browning ordered the bat? Leave it up to you to decide. By the way, I have mentioned this to Hillary and Bradsby on several occasions. They have yet to return my call. So I'll leave it. That's another piece of evidence there. Papa John's, John Schneider, born across the river here in Jeffersondale, went to Ball State. His father owned a tavern there off 10th Street in the Gateway Plaza in Jeffersonville. And Mick's Lounge became the first Papa John's. Of course, he sold his famed Corvette to finance his new pizza venture, and it cost him a little bit more pizza bucks to get it back in 2009.
Wow. Huh.
And we remember Papa John's today. They still have their campus out there off of Blanket Baker Parkway, I believe it is. And unfortunately, the Cardinal Stadium's name has been changed, although I still call it Papa John's, and y'all may still call it Papa John's, but it's now L&N Stadium. Humana, as noted earlier, I did work for Humana back in the 1980s. A little history of them. David Jones was born in the Parkland neighborhood in West Louisville. Wendell Cherry was down in South Central Kentucky at the Horse Cave. They both went to one went to UK, one went to Yale. They both met at a law firm here in Louisville. I think it was the Wyatt. It's now called Wyatt Tarrant Combs, but at the time it was not that. It was Wyatt something or other. And one of their lawyer friends was buying a very expensive house here in Louisville, and they're like going, "How can you afford that house?" And their friend mentioned that he bought a nursing home, and he's able to afford this new house. And light bulbs went off in David and Wendell's heads, and they said, "Well, why don't we do that?" And so in '61, they started the Extended Care Nursing Home Company, and did very well at that. In fact, this first nursing home, some of y'all may be familiar with it, is still located off Bardstown Road in the Hikes Point area. A little bit more of their history here. So the Humana building opened in '85. Wendell unfortunately passed away at the age of 55 from a brain tumor. '93 is when they went into insurance. David Jones retired. And David Jones passed away in 2019. Gosh, it's hard to believe that's been 5 years now. Some of the things are still remembered for, of course, the Humana building. Kentucky Center for the Arts, in my opinion, would never have been built without Wendell Cherry's determination and fortitude to get that done. Most of the artwork there was either donated by him or helped purchased because of him. And of course, I call it still 21st century parks, but the parklands of Floyd's Fork would never have happened without David Jones' advocacy for that. And I'm sure most of you have been following about Humana vacating their tower into the Waterside building and all that. It's very painful for us who once worked for Humana for that to happen, but hopefully it can be repurposed in some newer function in the future. This is their grave sites in Cave Hill Cemetery. Window right here, very nice grave site. David Jones there. If you're going to see Colonel Sanders, David Jones is not very far from Colonel Sanders. And also, if you see the David Jones gravesite, it has a bench there, and the bench is held up by these books. David was big into knowledge, and so the books represent knowledge, education. And in the near future, this was just installed this past week. The dedication will be in April, but Ed Hamilton here off to the side created a statue of David Jones. It stands down in front of the Waterside building there along the waterfront. And they just put it up this past week. I was there when they installed it. And then, like I say, the dedication will be in April. Muhammad Ali. About that. Doesn't look like much of a house, does it? But it now looks like this. It's Muhammad Ali's boyhood home there on Grand Avenue. And almost every day he rode his bike from his house all the way over to the gym, which was once located in this building here on 4th Street. It's now part of the Catherine Spalding University. But up top, at the very top, they put a replica of his bike. up there above to symbolize that Muhammad Ali, that's where he got his start in the boxing world at that gym. Joe Martin there on the upper left-hand corner with Muhammad Ali. Helped start it. When this bike got stolen, Muhammad wanted to go and find whoever stole it from him and beat the person up. And Joe Martin says, well, you need to learn to box first, and that sort of got him going on his career path. Some of his accomplishments: he was 18 years old when he won the gold medal at the, I think it was the Rome Olympics. Became heavyweight champion. In fact, just in the last week or so was the anniversary of that, 60 years ago, when he became heavyweight champion. He changed his name also in that same time period, and more about his life. Of course, his funeral, I'm sure everyone here remembers the funeral, just probably the most grandest funeral in our city's history. Hundreds, thousands, who knows how many were there to observe this. And they put these rose petals out along the entrance to Cave Hill. And this is his gravesite there at Cave Hill. Periodically, you'll go to the gravesite and someone will put rose petals along there. Usually around Derby time when his family is all back in town here, one of them will go and put rose petals up these steps there. Muhammad is actually buried right at the top of the steps there, and he's buried non-traditionally as opposed to Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders was buried the traditional way. He was not cremated, or else he would have been extra crispy. Hopefully you don't call it that. But anyways, Muhammad Ali was untraditionally buried. He's buried parallel to the road. Most everyone is buried perpendicular to the road, but he's buried parallel and he's turned on his side. And the reason for that is he's facing Mecca in the Islamic tradition. So Muslims have to be facing Mecca when they are buried, so that's why Muhammad is somewhat different than everyone else at Cave Hill. And we remember him today by his Ali Center down on the waterfront. And they just renamed the airport Muhammad Ali International Airport. I want to comment on this photograph here. That's one that I took of Muhammad back in the early 2000s when they made the announcement for the Ali Center. I was invited down to be part of the announcement of the new center. And it was a crowded, I think it was Morton's Steakhouse is where they had the announcement. And it was just packed. You couldn't move there that day. And all of a sudden, the crowd parted like the Red Sea, and here comes Muhammad just walking right down through the center, and me and my wife are right at the very end of it, and Muhammad's walking right towards us, and I told my wife, I said, stand off to the side, I'm going to get a photograph of you shaking hands with Muhammad Ali. So he gets up there to the front of us, and he turns to shake my wife's hand. I had camera up, click. Right as I clicked, he turned and did that. Pointed right at the camera. He always knew where the camera was at, Muhammad did. So that's one of my grand contacts with Muhammad Ali. Hopefully other folks have seen him. He was always here in the community doing various events. And there we go. Those are the Louisville originals. Those are 8 of those. And so hopefully you learned a little bit about some of those that have made Louisville a better place in which to live. Any other questions on that?
I do.
Yes, go